So we like to start with a bow. I think of it as just a kind of a wake up, these little gestures. That includes the bell and everything like that. So, tonight the topic of the talk is called, I dreamt up a title, Styles of Imprisonment. I don't think it's mine actually. But it's about a doctrine within Buddhism called the realms, the 6 realms, or in the Sanskrit they're called loka. And this is a description of confusion, of unenlightenment, and the styles that it can take. I just want to briefly sort of go through last week, which leads up to this. Last week we talked about the development of ego, the development of confusion from scratch altogether, how it starts. And the idea is that it's happening all the time, actually. It's not that it happened sometime long ago and has developed and we're stuck with it now. It's happening every instant. The fall, as it were, into confusion. And for the same reason, it's capable every instant to undo it and to wake up and to become an enlightened person, more or less, fully, or if even just for a second, that one awakens into this present moment and into what is real. Now, the basic idea, though, is that in the middle of all this open space that we're sitting in right now, full of sights and sounds, and, well, actually full of what are called the 6 knowables. The 6 knowables are objects of sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and mental events, objects of mind. And that in the middle of all this, it's like flashing colors. What happens is that sort of magically a mistake is made and a figure emerges against the ground. You might say that, suddenly there's Marco, and everything else fades into relative, less importance. Or, there's the cushion. I'm looking for a cushion, and I'm looking for that cushion, and I ignore, to a certain degree, everything else. Suddenly we've got a figure and ground situation. The ground is what is unimportant, and the figure is what is important. And that separation out of that figure, which is momentary, happens from time to time. Suddenly there's a cushion, suddenly there's a person, suddenly there's a sound. Oh, what was that sound? And you notice the sound, and everything else fades into unimportance. And that importance, you might say, implies a perceiver of it over here. So there's kind of a motion from that to this, from that thing out there to this here. This is the birth of what in Buddhism we call this false idea of a self, or as Rinpoche translated it, ego. He used the Freudian term, the sense of I, because I am always the perceiver. Now it's ironic that if you go looking for I, you can never actually find it, because the I that tries to see I, it's like trying to see your own eyeballs, It always recedes into the center, further into the center. You can never quite see it. If whatever you're looking at isn't it, isn't the I, it's an object out there, however close. But it's an implication that I exist, and that implication takes place in time. It's like it goes from there to here. I am is a statement that has a beginning and an end. And the end is important because that end is death. As soon as we stop talking about or thinking about I, there is no I. It's just a story. It's a statement. So what do? Well, we want to buttress it because I wants to keep going. I is very concerned with its ongoing existence. And so what I does is, what this perceiver, is it reaches back out towards the other to feel the quality of it. It wants a relationship. It's kind of like, the old story about back in the 60s, people experimented with sensory deprivation, putting people in sensory deprivation tanks. And the suspicion, or the hope maybe, was that if you deprived everybody of sensory input, they would lose their sense of self. And to some extent people experience that, but it's really hard to eliminate all sense data. So what I does is it reaches out towards the other to make a relationship with that. Because that relationship proves I'm here. If I'm in a relationship, if that's out there, then I'm here. And is that thing out there for me, against me, or indifferent to me? And those are the three options. There's no fourth. Either that thing out there is going to augment the existence of I, make it stronger, detract from it, make it weaker, or it's indifferent to it. And these three possibilities are called in Buddhism the three poisons. And they're symbolized in the Wheel of Life by a chicken, a pig, and a snake. And the chicken, or the rooster, is passion, pulling something towards you because you want to consume it. You want to make yourself stronger with it. And the snake is hatred. You see that as enemy. You want to get it out of your orbit. Get rid of it. And the pig is stupidity, indifference. Doesn't care. And these three responses are really the core energies of the emotions. And we'll come to that in a minute, because that's really what this talk is about. So at the second level of the development of ego, this perceiver, this implied perceiver, reaches out and wants to feel the quality of other. And the message comes back. The other is either for me, against me, or indifferent. And based on that, we go to the third step, which is you push it away, you pull it towards you, or you stay the same distance. And this is the energies of the emotions. This is fundamentally what all emotions are about. Pushing something away, bringing it towards you to consume it or meld with it, and you don't care. That's the third possibility. And that's the third level. But it's very inefficient. It's like a child when they're just learning about the world, and they respond inefficiently to different stimuli because they haven't learned really what's up. And so the fourth development is that we develop labels for categorizing things as being for me, against me, or indifferent, and other kind of subtle variations on those themes. And these labels are conceptual. And we say, that person is beautiful, this candy is delicious, this food tastes terrible, it's much too hot today, and I'm uncomfortable. And we develop all of these conceptual frameworks for trying to maintain a relationship. Now, a relationship doesn't, in order to prove that I exist, doesn't have to be pleasant. It can be painful. And still, it proves that I'm here. So, for instance, something that out there to be afraid of, that provokes fear in you, proves that you're here. Being afraid of it proves that I is alive and well. So they don't have to be pleasant. And these conceptual devices, these concepts, then get organized. They get organized into stories. So the child is taught, I used this last week, that I watched my daughter go through this, that you teach the child when they're growing up, they're 2 or so, and they're wandering around the kitchen, and you say, the stove is hot, don't touch the stove. And the child learns, and they point to the stove, and they say, hot, hot, But they'll do it even when the stove isn't hot, And so these conceptual frameworks that we develop are not bona fide, they're not 100%, they're not perfect, they're flawed, they're subject to error. But nonetheless, they are patterns that we use with which to organize the world. And you begin to learn, maybe the stove isn't hot all the time, but you got to be careful about the stove. You got to check to see if it's hot or not. And so we learn these stories about the world, and we repeat them over and over again. And oftentimes, they're very inaccurate. they could lead us into all kinds of error. So for instance, I'm just making it up, you've had an angry mother. That's one I like because my mother was angry. And you meet somebody on the street who looks like her, and you immediately, your alarm bells go off, and you think, oh my God, an angry woman, even though this person turns out not at all like your mother was, but you make mistakes. We make conceptual recognition mistakes all the time because these stories are very clumsy. They're conceptual frameworks, and they're all about pleasure and pain. They're all about those three basic impulses: what's for me, against me, or indifferent to me. And eventually the energy of that push-pull, like the baby, when a child is born, an infant, they're really at the level of this third level. They're called skandhas, these levels. Because the child, when it sees the tit, it wants to have milk. When it's feeling pain, it cries. It's all at an instinctual level. Push-pull. Get rid of the pain, pull the pleasure towards me. So you take that energy of the push-pull and you combine it with the stories at the fourth level. Those stories, by the way, are the stuff of karma. They are stories like, just make one up, I got to worry about the rent. I'm not making enough money. I got to work harder. I've got to go borrow some money. I'm worried. I'm anxious. And we're stuck telling ourselves a story that is emotional, it's value-laden, and it traps us. It traps us into a pattern of action. That person insulted me. I've got to get even. How am I going to do it? I'll think of a way, and we set off on a course to get revenge or to even the score. And we get trapped in a story. I'm making up unpleasant ones, but there are more benign ones, to be sure. Lots and lots and lots of them. The stories that we tell ourselves. And this is the stuff of the fourth skandha, the fourth development. And then things begin to get mixed up. And the energy of the push-pull of the third level and the storylines of the fourth begin to combine. And we begin to get very complicated scenarios about who we are and what the world is. And you begin to get much more subtle combinations of energy and story. And these are called the full-blown emotions. Or in the Sanskrit, they're called klesha, which is literally termed defilement. It's usually translated as defilement. Because it defiles the world. When we see the world through this emotional, value-laden story, we're not seeing the world as it is. We're seeing it perverted. And then you get the full-blown emotions like jealousy, pride, indifference, lust, passion, what do we think of stupidity, anger. That's a pretty good collection. And so you get all these different possibilities of emotional responses to the world, and this is where the realms come in. These 6 realms. Actually, the structure of this is the structure of confusion, and it's very good to begin to see it, because as long as we are sleepwalking in it, there's no way out. The only way to get out of it is to begin to become aware of it, which is why when we meditate, we're not trying to get rid of thought, we're trying to see it. Then you're seeing the realms. Then you're seeing how your mind is working. Then there's a possibility of making a relationship with that. And the relationship we want to make is not one of hatred, is not one of trying to destroy the confusion or the illusion. It's one of having compassion for ourselves, of being interested even in what stories we're telling ourselves. Now, there are 3 levels to this structure of confusion. This is called samsara in Buddhism. And samsara literally means, that's a Sanskrit word, it means circle. Because we tend to circle endlessly in confusion, around and around, going through these different realms, different styles of confusion. In Tibetan they call it korwa, means the same thing, circle. And there's an image for it that's used, you might see it in the Wheel of Life, I think. It's a snake biting its own tail, just goes around and around. And so there are these three levels, but the main one that really I think is the most interesting, especially for us, is the third one. It's called these are called dhatus in Sanskrit. Dhatu means like a space or a realm, an area. And the area that we're most interested in is called the area or the realm of desire. The Kama Dhatu. You've heard of the Kama Sutra. You know, Kama means desire. And this is the Kama Dhatu. And it's divided into 6 parts. I'll go through the other 2 dhatus towards the end just to give you the full landscape. But these 6 are the most interesting. And they are, just quickly, I'll just list them from top to bottom. The God realm, the realm of the jealous gods, they're called asuras in Sanskrit. Deva Loka, God realm. Deva means God, Loka means realm. The asura, or the jealous god realm. The human realm. The animal realm. We're going down. The realm of the hungry ghosts, and we'll come to that one. That's an interesting one. And then the hell realm. Above all, you want to avoid the 3 lower realms. The animal, hungry ghost, and hell realm. Those are bad places to get stuck. The ideal realm, interestingly, is the human realm. That's the one you want to be in as a confused human being, an unenlightened person, because it's the ideal realm in which to practice. In fact, it's the only realm from which you can actually get enlightened. And there are different descriptions of why. One is psychological, that it's the only realm that is psychologically congenial, you might say, to treading the path. And the other description is more yogic, that in the other realms we have different equipment. Our bodies and minds are somewhat different, and we don't have all the parts necessary to actually achieve enlightenment in the hell realm, God realm, and so forth. So what these realms are, you see, are portraits of psychological confusion. And there are 3 ways to understand every realm. Okay? And I don't mean to make things unnecessarily complicated. I think you'll find this helpful. Let's take, for instance, the hell realm. The hell realm is the realm of hatred. The emotion connected with the hell realm is hatred. And it's a place where one's very existence is in question. There's tremendous pain. You feel like you're under enormous threat, that the threat is to your life, your well-being, that it's fundamental and important and really, really bad, dangerous. And as a result, there's tremendous feeling of claustrophobia, of threat and attack coming at you or about to come at you. And the atmosphere is hot. There's not enough air. And you are trapped. And you are fighting like crazy to break out of the walls. And like crazy, I mean crazy. The hell realms are very bad. And we all have seen people who are in the hell realms. Sometimes you see them on the streets of New York, yelling and screaming and talking to themselves in various ways, in pain. Because the hell realm is a realm of pain. In the hell realm, you see threats coming at you from all different locations. Now, there are 3 ways to understand this. One is that you can be in the hell realm for years. It can be, and there are people in mental institutions who are, padded cells. Remember that whole idea of straitjackets. People who are self-destructive, people who are suicidal, who are in such pain that they would rather try to kill themselves than endure what they're enduring mentally, the conditions. So one level of understanding the realms is that it goes on for a long period of time in your life. It could be your whole life, could be some years, some big block of time. The second level of understanding, and this is the one probably that I'm not going to deal with much tonight, is that, in fact, everybody in this room is born into the human realm. Some of you have pets, a dog or a cat or a canary or something. Those are sentient beings that have been born into the animal realm. So it's possible to actually be born into a realm and stay there for your entire life and embody it. And you can be born into the hell realm and stay there your entire life, or the God realm. But that has to do, in order to discuss that, we would have to be talking about the Buddhist idea of rebirth and what happens when you have physical death, after physical death, and there's a whole raft of teachings about that, the Bardo teachings. You've heard about the Tibetan Book of the Dead. That's the most popular presentation of those teachings about what happens at the time of physical death, and then the idea of being reborn. And in Buddhism, since we deny in Buddhism that the I actually exists, we're not talking about reincarnation, which is the idea that an eternal soul finds a new body, again and again. But rather we're talking about death and rebirth, which is happening right now. As these words come out of my mouth and they die, and then a new word is born, you make a gesture, it dies and is born. But that's another version of what the realms are about, what we're actually born into. We could talk about that, if you wish, towards the end, or not. Because it's possible that when you die from this life, you could be reborn into a different realm, or not. Ideally not. Ideally you want to be reborn as a human being. The third level is actually is also very interesting. The third level of understanding the realms, and that is that from moment to moment, we can be born into a realm. So somebody says a nasty thing to you and you experience a flash of fury, and suddenly, it's like drinking molten metal. You're so angry, and you're born into the hell realm. Somebody gives you a great gift, they compliment you, and you feel uplifted and delightful, and you've been born into the God realm for a minute, So we can experience these momentarily in the course of our lives, these realms. And at the same time, each one of us may have a particular neurotic style that can be characterized by one of the realms. Now, the chances are that most people in this room, their style is human. But it doesn't have to be. So, for instance, one of my favorites, well, let's just go through them. Because I've met a lot of jealous gods, I think, in this life, and even a few gods now and then. And I think I've experienced the God realm for a while. So let's go from the bottom up and see there's a logic to this. So the bottom up is that the bottom is the hell realm, of course, and there are actually 18 different hells, 9 cold and 9 hot. The hot are the worst. And then there are a couple of ancillary hells as well. I forget what they are. And they're really terrible. I mean, they're described as being really awful, these hells. And if you want to read, there's kind of a wonderful book that probably you'll hate. I mean, most people seem to hate it. I love it. And once you get into Buddhism more and can translate the cultural isms into your experience, then you'll love this book. It's called The Words of My Perfect Teacher by Patrul Rinpoche, who lived in the 1700s, I think, and a great Tibetan teacher. And he describes the hells, and it's like fire and brimstone. It's fundamentalist Buddhism. It really is, and you just gotta love it, the way he describes them. And he says just fierce things, about how you're going to be born and go around and around and around and circle through the realms. So if you're in the hell realm, what happens is you've got this terrible suffering and fear and anger. When you're frightened, when you're made to be afraid, you strike out. You've got to fight back. You do something. Maybe even kill yourself. That's an interesting one. From a Buddhist point of view, you can't actually kill yourself. I remember having a big argument with Trungpa Rinpoche, my teacher, about this. He said, you can't kill yourself. And I said, of course you can kill yourself. You can put a gun to your head, pull the trigger, you know. And he said, yeah, but you can't bet the killer is left. You can't kill yourself because you don't exist. There is no I. There's just this ongoing present moment full of change, you see. And if you commit suicide, well, it can be very painful, but the consciousness is going to continue. And all now, it's collecting a lot of very bad karma. You've committed this act of terrible aggression. Because you see, when you kill another person, you kill one person. But the reason that suicide is so heinous a crime in Buddhism as in every religion is that when you kill yourself, you kill the whole world. It's a rejection of everything. All the people who love you, everybody. So, here's this person stuck in the hell realm, terrible suffering. But at some point, they begin to sort of collapse. They begin to lose their strength to fight. You know, you get exhausted. And when you get exhausted, you stop generating as much heat. And, you know, because you stop struggling so hard. And when you do that, you begin to see the possibility of some kind of relief. Because the heat is diminishing. And suddenly there's a little more space and a little more air. And this is the movement up into the next realm, which is the realm of the hungry ghosts, the pretas. The hungry ghost is a being who sees the possibility of relief from pain and wants it. They're terribly hungry for it. You see, the hell being isn't hungry for anything. They're just frightened to death. They're full of hatred, aggression, you know, crazy. But when they begin to see that there is a possibility of relief from that, then the hunger develops. And that's what the hungry ghost is. The hungry ghost is a person who is consumed with hunger for relief from their suffering. The classic depiction of a hungry ghost is of a being that has an enormous belly and has a tiny little neck and a mouth, tiny mouth. And they're immensely hungry. They're hungry for this relief. And all they can ever take is one drop of liquid and one grain of rice. That's all they can get down there through their mouth and their throat at a time. They just can't get enough. And perhaps you've met people like this. I can think of one person that I knew in college, who I look back on and I think, hungry ghost. This person was always, he was sycophant. You know the word sycophant, right? Somebody who's sucking up, who always wanted to be included, who's always you felt this person felt impoverished. They always wanted something from you. They wanted your praise. They wanted your friendship. It made you feel uncomfortable. Me. Although you couldn't do anything but be kind, you know, to that person to the extent that you could, because, you know, they weren't harming you. They were just, it was sad, that feeling of poverty on that person's part. And there are lots of hungry ghosts around. In fact, at the level of actually being born into being a hungry ghost, like we're born as humans, what they say, this will amuse you, is that hungry ghosts are everywhere, and they live up in the corners of the rooms, and you can't see them. You're as oblivious. They're as oblivious of us as we are of them. That's one version of them, and there are others. Like those of you who know the Heart Sutra, it ends with a reference to the Gandharvas. Gandharvas are celestial musicians. They're hungry ghosts. They're pretas, and they live on music. It's like food to them. So, at some point, that person, that hungry ghost, begins to realize that they can actually consume something if they're patient, and they can do it little by little, and perhaps more and more. And at that point, they move up into the next realm, which is the animal realm. The animal realm is the realm of stupidity. That's the emotion, the defilement that's connected with that. And the symbol for it, again, is a pig. A pig just eats whatever comes in front of it. Just wants to consume, devour. See, animals have a very limited range of response. They're more intelligent than hell beings and hungry ghosts. But still, I mean, what does a dog do? It wags its tail, it licks you, jumps up, barks, has a very limited range of response compared to any of us. We go to opera, we cook fabulous meals, we make love, in all different kinds of complicated ways. Animals don't do that. Dogs just fuck, It's very, very, very simple. So animals, that's the stupidity. They just do whatever comes in front. They're looking for pleasure. They're looking to avoid pain. And it's a very unpleasant place to be in the animal realm. I mean, to be a domesticated pet is probably better, but I mean, most animals live in fear of their lives. They're predator and prey in many animals. And then you move up again, and the person begins to calm down even more, and you see it's a matter of becoming more and more intelligent is what's happening here, up to a point. And that being, they begin to sort of look around, and they begin to realize that this kibble's better than that kibble, as it were. That the steak tartare is better than the ground chuck. And you begin to become discriminating. And this is the human realm. It's the realm of passion and discrimination and connoisseurship. And we pick and choose, and we like this shirt and we don't like that shirt, and we like the way this person looks, and we're not attracted to that person. And we go on and on like this, discriminating and trying to adjust our world to give us maximum pleasure, if we can. And it's sort of the world of hearth and home as well. It's like the fire in the fireplace, the nice glass of Chablis, wonderful smells coming out of the kitchen. The human realm. And then we might begin to fantasize the possibility of a lot of pleasure. Not just sort of a nice steak from time to time and a glass of Chablis, but maybe getting really, really rich, like being a billionaire. And we start to fantasize about this and think about, how can I get that? I know people who've got it. I know there are the people out there like Donald Trump, and Elon Musk, and all these people who've got billions of dollars, or who are just beautiful, Brad Pitts of the world, or, whoever. Huh? Kardashian? I don't know if I want that one, but anyhow, yeah. And we start to become jealous of these other people and what they've got. And that propels us into the fifth realm, which is the realm of the jealous gods. And they're gods because you get very, very smart. See, these gods, the asuras, they're driven by jealousy. Everything is comparative. What have I got? What do they have? There's a constant act of comparison going on. And they see this possibility for being really, really happy, which means they want to get to heaven. See, they've seen a version of heaven. It might be being rich, it might be being beautiful, it might be having a great body, it might be being loved, it might be whatever it might be. And they could be admired, famous, great author, great artist. And so they see that other people have got this, and maybe I could get this, and how can I get this? And they start strategizing and scheming for, how can I get into heaven? How can I get what these other people have got? This is the jealous gods. And I know we've all met jealous gods. I think a lot of the people on Wall Street are jealous gods, people I've met in the financial industries, because they're really, really focused on getting rich, and a lot of people do. If you focus on it well enough. And then finally, you actually make it. You get there. You get that much money, the amount of money that you thought you needed. You get the physical beauty. You get the love. You get the approval, the praise that you were searching for. Whatever it is, whatever things or combination of qualities, properties, possessions that does it, and you have arrived. You've arrived. You're in heaven. You see, the jealous gods are storming the gates of heaven. When it's depicted in the Wheel of Life, the gods are up there in heaven, and there are walls all around heaven, and the jealous gods are storming the walls. They're trying to breach the walls, grappling hooks and ladders and all this stuff. Because they're fighting. They're warriors. Jealous gods are not only comparative, they're really fiercely smart. They're dangerous people because they're combative and intelligent, very intelligent, skilled at their craft. And at some point, they might make it. And that's what defines a god. A god or a goddess is a person who feels that they have arrived. They've made it. Now I can relax. Now I've actually got it. I'm secure. Have I really got it? Yeah, I've got it. And you got to keep checking. Do I really have it? Yeah, I've got it. Maybe I don't have it. No, I've got it. I've got enough money, I've got enough beauty, I've got enough love, I've got enough praise. Until you don't. But while you do, you become more and more relaxed, more and more confident that you have arrived. And that's what constitutes being a god, is that utter relaxation into the realm of pleasure. I've got the pleasure that I was pursuing. And they say of gods that their bodies are made of light, that everything they see is beautiful, everything they smell is perfume, everything they eat is ambrosia, everything they drink is nectar. They make love with a glance. It's all perfect, more or less. Except it's not really. It's just that you set out on this quest to get something, and now you've got it. And in the first blush, when a god first arrives, they're really, really checking because they can't quite believe it. Did I actually do it? I did it. I got it. I won the lottery. I'm here. And then eventually they start to settle in. And the definition really of godship is, yeah, I'm here. But there's this subtle checking that has to keep going on. Am I here? Yeah, I'm really here. I'm a god? Yes, I'm really a god. Do I have what I wanted? Yes, I really have it. Isn't it wonderful? And maybe you've experienced this. I know I have, and at different times. And it lasts until it doesn't, until circumstances change. And what you thought you had goes away. Your physical beauty dissolves. I used to do a lot of business up in Aspen back in the 70s, 1970s. I was in a business that took me up there a lot. Boy, is that was then. I haven't been up there in years. I'm sure it's the same, though, I would imagine. It's the realm of money and beauty. Everybody wants to be young and beautiful. And as people start to age, you can see the effort to avoid it, to stay young and beautiful in Aspen. It's really fierce up there. It's such a beautiful place. It's a god realm. It really is a god realm. In order to be there, you have to be fairly rich. It's so expensive to live there. If you work there, you can't live there. That was a big problem they used to have there, and now they've solved it. But they had to export all their workers to communities around Aspen because none of the people who staffed the bars and restaurants and cleaned the apartments could afford to live in Aspen. It was so outrageously expensive. Total god realm. But eventually what happens is that things change. And that beautiful movie star begins to lose their looks. Or maybe the person who is so rich loses their money. Or maybe the person who is so rich discovers they've got a fatal disease and that the money isn't going to help them. And at that point, things start to change. And what they say of the gods is that at some point, you stay in the God realm a long time. It's psychologically a long time. But when you begin to fall, the other gods see it. And it's as though you become slightly putrescent. You start to stink. Develop body odor where you had none. And the other gods avoid you. They don't want to know you because you show them, remind them of the possibility of what might happen to them. And then you begin the long descent because you begin to feel that you're an inferior god and you wish to become a superior one again. So automatically you descend into the realm of the jealous gods. And then from there, you're in a jealous god and you begin to realize that you're not going to make it back into the god realm, so maybe you can just maximize your pleasure in the realm you're in the state of mind you're in, and you begin to descend into the human realm of trying to have more pleasures in your life, through more simple means, not being a warrior, not being envious or jealous, but appreciating. And then you begin to become sort of stupid about it, about your consumption. And where does that take you? Down into the animal realm, and so forth. And you can go all the way down into the hell realm. Descend through disappointment and sorrow and loss that comes to us all as we age, as we go through cycles of wealth and poverty, of love and not being loved, loneliness, being adored, praised, ignored. And Patrul Rinpoche says, he's so fierce about this. He says, if you're rich, you're going to be poor. If you're poor, you'll be rich. If you're loved, you'll be reviled. If you're hated, you'll be admired. It just goes around and around and around. As long as one is trapped in this belief in an I, trying to maintain its existence in one style or another. And here's one of the interesting things about the realms. Sure, the God realm is a lot more pleasant than the hell realm. But the fundamental purpose of all the realms is to keep I alive. I is this story. It's the hero in the story. It could be a story about pleasure. It could be a story about fear. But even when you're afraid, even when you're suffering, the purpose of that fear and suffering is to keep that story going. I is alive. I is present. It's a kind of entertainment. Even when we're really unhappy, it's very entertaining. It's gripping. It's like watching Kim Kardashian on TV, or remember Donald Trump in the Apprentice. It's sort of painfully involving, which is what all these stories are, and that's their main purpose, is to keep that story alive with these different psychologies. So, what do we do about it? One guess. Meditate. And the reason that meditation is the only way, as Trungpa Rinpoche said, it was so irritating when he said that, I thought he sounded like a true believer, like a born-again something, Buddhist. Born-again Buddhist. But he said it's the only way, and the reason it's the only way is that the act of meditation is continually seeing the story and coming back to awareness in the present moment. Whenever one is fully 100% here, there is no I. You don't have time for it. It's not being said. I is a story that we tell ourselves about the past and the future. And as soon as we're feeling the breath coming out of our nostrils, that sensation, we're right there with it. there's no I, at least for some brief period of time, or maybe a longer one. When you become aware in the present moment of this world, that whole story of I disappears, and all of these karmic realms, because that's what these are. These are the realms of karma, these stories, evaporate for however long. So the constant practice is to come back to awareness. It's ironic, you know? I mean, what we're doing is we're waking up. You could be walking down the street having this furious conversation with somebody that you're just mad as hell about, blah, 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 and you stumble on the sidewalk and fall flat on your face and get back up and keep on doing it, and then a car horn blasts, and suddenly you come back and you realize where you are, and that story evaporates because you're right there on the sidewalk, you know? Or how about this one? You walk down the street and you see somebody coming towards you, and for some reason they remind you of somebody that you don't like, and within seconds you're having an argument or a fight with this person, and then you walk by them and you say, whoops, it was a dream, it was a daydream, you know, or you've made love to that person, you know, as you walked by them on the street. And we come back into the present moment, and when we do, those dreams evaporate into thin air. And that's the practice of meditation. Continually. Practice of waking up from these dreams of confusion. But they're very powerful, these dreams, and they have huge momentum. We've got habits. I'm not going to give you the wonky Sanskrit or Tibetan, but the idea is that they're habitual thoughts. Milarepa, if you ever read Milarepa, 100,000 Songs of Milarepa, he was a great saint, lived in the 11th century in Tibet, lived in a cave. All he ate was nettle soup for a long time and turned green from eating nettle soup. And he inveighs against these habitual patterns. He just goes on and on about how pernicious they are, these terrible habitual patterns. And the only way to cure yourself of them is to constantly identify them, to see them, to treat them with compassion. Not as enemies, but with compassion. You know, there's a kind of softness for them. And to let them go and come back to the present moment. And Trungpa Rinpoche talked about this. He called it switching your allegiance from those stories, which are the realms, to the real world, this life in the present moment, this world now, which could become sort of scary because we get so used to those stories. They give us a frame of reference. They are familiar. They're like old friends, painful, shitty friends. They really torture us. But we don't want to quite give them up yet, you know. But every time you come back to the present, you do. And then it's just this. Like we did in that meditation before this talk. So you could study the realms. They're wonderful to study. They're very colorful. And you can read Patrul Rinpoche. There's a friend of mine, David Nichtern, who wrote a book about the realms. I haven't read it. Is it good? Really good? Oh, Mike's read it, and he like, yeah? Okay. Awakening from the dream. Yeah, because that's what the realms are. They're the dreams. The dreams about me, who I am, my virtues, my deficiencies, my successes, my failures, all of this. You got to jettison all of that, which could be scary. You're giving up reference points, identity, who I am. Although the real identity then can emerge. The real identity is who each one of us is as we present right now, in the present moment. Each one of us with our unique, vivid qualities, which only get covered over and blurred and muted when we act habitually out of past patternings. So we're freeing ourselves from karma, the karma of the realms. Now I'll just mention that there are two other levels. Remember I said this was the realm of desire, these 6 realms. And above that, there are 2 more. These are called dhatus. This is the kama dhatu. Above this, sort of, they're usually arranged above it in a pictorial form, is the realm of pure form, it's called. And above that, the formless realm. Now, these aren't really relevant to us too much. These are purely mental states. They are achieved through immense acts of concentration. It's kind of a form of self-hypnosis. It's also what you could achieve these realms, the realm of pure form or the formless realm, if you focused very, very, very hard, focused your attention and locked in on an object of meditation, like the breath. Actually, you need something a little different, but you can do it with the breath, anything. And when you perfect that kind of concentration, there's always still a slight checking that's going on. Am I concentrating on the breath? Yes, I am. Am I on the breath? Yes, I am. Like that. But you can actually achieve a very pleasurable, blissful state of almost trance. These are called the dhyanas, the states of these 2 higher dhatus. And there are 4 divisions in each one. And they get increasingly subtle, what the object of meditation is. But they're very, in Buddhism, we don't practice them. Although I asked Rinpoche once if it would ever be useful to, and he said yes, basically after you've gotten a tremendous understanding of sanity, switching your loyalty from dreams to the present moment. And I asked him why, and he said, well, you can achieve flexibility of mind. But there are lots of stories about people doing it early on because they want to have pleasure. See, it is pleasurable. These dhyanas, they're called, or jhanas in the Pali, for those of you who know that tradition. And they're very pleasurable, and you can get stuck there for long periods of time because they're blissful. They're higher than the God realms. They're forms of the God realm. So they're very pleasurable. But like anything else that's created, they are subject to decay, and they will decay, and they will let you down. And then you will come back down and still keep circling through samsara, through confusion, through the realms. So they're not a good idea, those things, those realms. I just mentioned them sort of to flesh out the complete picture of what's possible in confused samsaric mentality. So that's, I feel like giving bad news tonight. But it's kind of fun, isn't it? And really, the interesting thing is if you can identify. So, for instance, here's a good example and a good exercise. Many of us experience morning depression. You wake up in the morning and you're lying in bed, and it might be hard to get out of bed. That's a common thing for a lot of people. It's probably the time of day when people are most subject to that kind of depression. And if you can see it with some kind of kindness for yourself, you might be able to, instead of hating it and wanting to get rid of it, you might be able to sort of take it to your heart as almost like a friend, like with some compassion for yourself. And then it becomes softer. What they say about the realms, you see, these realms are like walls that they entrap us in worlds, and we can't break out because they seem so real. But when you begin to develop some awareness of the walls and also some compassion for them, some feeling of softness, of kindness for yourself, then the walls become permeable and you can walk through them. I mean, that's a very radical idea. For instance, to take with something more like morning depression. So I think that's all I'm going to say tonight. Run on for a while so we can have a discussion. Anybody want to make a complaint? You have a question?
Yeah.
Okay, and announce your name so that people know who you are.
Hi, I'm Tim.
Yeah.
And I have a question about the stories. I'll try and make it as uncomplicated as possible. So definitely, I think that it's helpful to perceive the created things my mind is creating as stories. But my question is, there are some stories in the world, like the Jataka tales, which are stories of the Buddha's past lives, which are intended to be teaching tools, if you will. And so I definitely understand that there are stories that are not correct or not true or built on misperceptions, like when I might see someone in my own mind as an enemy when they're actually not an enemy. I'm creating them as an enemy. But sometimes I think that in what another of my teachers calls meat space, there are stories like meat space. Yeah, this one right here, where, for example, I spill boiling hot water on my hand and it burns my hand. And is there some takeaway from that so that I'm not saying, well, gee, you know, I burned my hand really badly the last 3 times, but maybe this will be the time that it doesn't happen? Or perhaps in a dating situation where I find myself in a relationship with someone who's very controlling and it's painful and unpleasant until it comes to an end, but I'm always attracted to that person, and so maybe, even though this is the 16th controlling person, maybe this will be the one where it doesn't actually happen. So my question is, are there lessons to be taken from the stories if I understand them to be stories? Is that a good question? Or is it a question at all? Is it maybe just a diatribe?
I'd like to hear what someone else thinks about this question. Yeah, please.
I feel that you're still holding on to the dream and that you need to switch the loyalty from the dreams to the present moment and not judge yourself like from the past actions or the 16th people. But when you switch the loyalty to the present moment, everything else like from the past like start filtering, and you stop being attracted to those kind of peoples, because you are finally beginning to have compassion and be kind towards yourself. So you're going to be automatically attracted to a different kind of person.
Okay, I'll accept that, but I would like to go back to the previous example. Like, normally every child burns their hand on the stove once, because you say hot, and they see stove. Sometimes the stove is hot, sometimes it's cold. And if it was always hot, you'd never be able to clean it because you would always burn yourself. But the boiling hot water is always going to burn me no matter where I put my loyalty.
Right.
I think.
Yeah.
So that's a useful story. I should stop burning myself with hot water.
But maybe you don't need a story. All you need to do is see that the water is boiling and not put it on your hand.
But I need a memory of being burned the last time, which is a story.
After a while, you don't need the memory. You just see it. A memory is a thought. You don't need to be thinking, that's boiling water. You can just see it. It's just like, you don't need to be thinking, this is John. You're just looking at me and you know who I am.
Sure.
And you know how to respond.
Sure.
You don't need thought.
But the time before the first time that I burned myself, I don't know that boiling hot water is harmful.
Right.
But after that,
then
I need the story of having been burned in the past.
You don't need the story.
How do I know that it's going to burn me?
Because you know now. I mean, how do you know that I'm going to respond after you stop talking and ask a question and give me the opportunity? You know, it's automatic. It's like we put too much faith in thought. You just don't need it. I want to get a T-shirt that we're going to maybe sell here if Rochelle agrees, that says, "Don't believe anything you think." Yes, yes. I remember Trungpa Rinpoche, I should bring it in. There's this part in the Profound Treasury, page 400, where he says over and over again, you don't need thought. The only purpose of thought is to prove that I exist. You don't, and he says it about 10 times. I mean, you know, after you've put your hand in got your hand burned in boiling water, do you need to think about it in order to avoid doing it again?
to judge whether the water's boiling or not?
Well, that's a different issue.
Like when you're going to step out in the street, you have to be reasonably sure that a relative bus is not going to come and flatten you.
Right. You look around, make sure before you cross the street.
But that's thinking. Observing whether or not there's a bus is thinking.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah.
But I think a lot of my problems come with misperception. And if perception wasn't necessary at all, then there would be no misperception.
Yeah, there are all kinds of things that happen that are unexpected in this world. Michelle?
Well, recently, I started to notice that the top of my right thigh was getting indented. Yeah, like an indenture. And I'm thinking, oh, my muscle is probably, on the blink or something. I mean, there's something wrong with me. And I was really starting to get worried that there was something, that my muscle was collapsing. Because, your muscles are really strong in your thighs, and all of a sudden there's this big dent. So I was thinking, well, what doctor could I go to see for this? I mean, who would know how to take care of it? And I was going on and getting really worried. And then one day I noticed, this is true, could not make this up. When I work at the computer at my desk, I always stand. So I'm standing at the computer, and suddenly I notice that the sharp edge of the desk is hitting right into my thigh. The part of the thigh that's collapsed. And this bell goes off, and I think, that's why I have a collapsed thigh, because this indenture, because every day for hours I'm standing at my desk leaning against on the right side. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm just not going to do that anymore. And literally every single day I notice that I'm leaning against the desk on the right side. And even though I know I'm doing it, it's been really difficult to change my posture. So from that I conclude, if it's so difficult to change my posture, knowing what I'm doing, how difficult is it to change the way we perceive things and do the same thing over and over and over again? And it's really just a matter of being aware. But it was just like an interesting realization.
And it sounds so difficult to switch one's loyalty from the dreams that we believe. But what the teachings say, what Trungpa Rinpoche said, is that if you just sit and begin also to take your awareness, see, when we did this awareness of the open space, you can bring that out into the street. That open awareness without the breath. And every time we do that, we are switching our loyalty from thought to the present moment, to what is real, to this. This is real. Because thoughts are always about the past and the future. And they're like stories that we have culled. We have selected out little teeny parts of what actually happened in the past and woven them into a meaningful, so-called meaningful story. And it's just like if you took everybody in this room and had them describe what happened here tonight, you'd get that many different stories. Because we each see it differently through our own veils of our experience and our values and our past experiences and the things we've loved and hated and been hurt by and been helped by. So the constant act, they liken it in the teachings to water dripping on a stone. That every time you come back to the present, sitting on the cushion in daily life, it's important to do it on the cushion because it's so hard to do it in daily life. There are so many triggers as we walk down the street that take us off into our habitual patterns. And there are fewer of those triggers when we sit on a cushion. So that's why it's important to do both. Actually, the best practice is if you can do it while you're walking down the street. It's just that it's so hard. We get lost. I've tried everything. We used to do things like write it on the back of our hands, You know, I got these stickers at an office supply store. They were orange, Kagyu colors, you know, the Tibetan colors, and I put them on my coffee cup, on my gear shift knob, on my car, on the telephone, you know. And after a while, they just get dirty, and you stop looking at them. And so you can try whatever it is, but I mean, coming back. Trungpa Rinpoche said, at some point, all your thoughts begin to become thoughts about these teachings. Basically about how we are confused and about coming back. The more you get into it. It's really reclaiming your one's life to come back from these dreams. I'm sorry, there was somebody here. Announce your name when you... Yeah.
Hi, I'm Fred. I've got a question about the hell realm. Because I was walking around today and I've been noticing more and more how just sometimes like sheer panic walks by me. Or like I walk by somebody and I'm just in sheer panic. I feel like somebody's just going to collapse my chest in. There's just this fear that overtakes me. And you know, before I used to go to the hungry ghost realm, you know, like, oh, I'll just be charming to people. You know, when I worked on Wall Street, I went to the jealous god realm, was that it? You know, just with the suit, you know, trudging through everything, you know, not caring about everybody, but, you know, trying to be human and just being like, oh, yeah, okay, I'm aware that there's this fear and they're probably not going to do this, and it's so hard.
Thank you. Yeah, it can be hard. Very hard. Our habitual patterns are so powerful. They come up in like a veil, and we see the world and ourselves through them. And they're so convincing when they happen. And so gripping, entertaining, involving, right? They really, really suck us in. So what you do is you see them, you let them go, and you come back. My practice in the morning, you know, with morning depression, get out of bed. You know, got to get out of bed. All you have to do is go pee. And that helps a lot. And practice is really good. Tony.
You said that Trungpa Rinpoche said that after a while, all your thoughts become about these teachings. And then what?
I think eventually you become the teachings, and then you stop having the thoughts about them. You know, you begin to realize that it's here, that it's arrived, and that you don't have to think about it anymore. You just be it. You give your loyalty to this world, and then you become a real bodhisattva, you know, an awakened being who lives his or her life in constant response, being helpful to other people to help them out of their confusion, that there's nothing else to do, out of, you know, compassion, love, kindness, intelligence, and responsiveness. Because, you know, as long as we're lost in our dreams, it's hard to be responsive. You know, somebody might come up to you and call your name and you don't even hear them, because one could be so lost in a daydream. But the more you come back, the more available one is. And they say of bodhisattvas that they have been cured, you know, of these realms, but that they travel endlessly through them, helping sentient beings in them. And that what that means is that they just see people, you know, in all the realms, and they're there for them in the present moment, helpful. Marco.
I have a question about the three animals.
About the animals?
Yeah, I've already heard about the three animals, like the pig, the snake, and the chicken. But I usually think about them as like emotions, like ignorance, proud, and anger. And when I heard you talking, I heard something very interesting when you were talking about that three animals as like, at least I understand it that way. I have an identity, and that identity needs to be recognized. So it's like search exterior objects or whatever to confirm itself, like the ego have the necessity to confirm itself in the others. I thought it's very, very interesting, and I kept thinking about how can we stop that necessity of and needing to be recognized.
You just, like right now, you're right here with me. Just come back to this. Every time we do that, we're cutting through confusion, cutting through error. We cut through it simply by coming back to this present moment. You cut through again and again. That term, Trungpa Rinpoche wrote the book that people can be reading. Are there people who've been reading it here? Yeah, cutting through. Cutting through. Now, cutting through is actually a technical term. It's a translation of a Dzogchen term. Dzogchen is really the highest of all the Tibetan teachings. It means great perfection. And there are two practices connected with Dzogchen teachings. And the first, and perhaps the most important of them, is called cutting through. And it's the same thing we're talking about tonight. It means cutting through thought, cutting through the I and other problems, cutting through the stories, coming back to this present moment. It's the term is trekchit.
Thank you.
So maybe we ought to end. Mike's looking at his watch. Thank you for doing that. So we are going to be closed for the month of August. We have one more talk here next week. Michael Rogan is going to speak. Michael Rogan's a wonderful teacher. And we're going to resume again right after Labor Day. Rochelle will be giving a talk on the Four Noble Truths. And so that'll be on the 11th. And everybody's got a vacation from the Dharma, or at least this Dharma. But I'm hoping you're going to keep practicing. And so now we're going to dedicate the merit. And I just love what I read recently. This is what we're doing, is we're giving away all the benefit that we've gotten from hearing the teachings tonight to other sentient beings. It's an act of generosity. We're being bodhisattvas. See? Awakened beings working for the benefit of others. And I'll just repeat this, I've said it before, that I recently read this dialogue between a student and a teacher where the student said, look, don't we need the merit, so that we can progress along the path? And the teacher sort of said, embarrassedly, he or she, whoever it was, said, actually, I shouldn't be saying this, but if you really give away the merit, you get more merit. Then if you try to keep the merit. But that's a sticky wicket, don't you think? Okay. By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings by the confidence of the golden sun of the great east. May the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.